Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are shifting gears a bit today. Usually we're tearing apart a specific book or maybe some breaking news, but today we're looking at a system.
A method, really.
Yes, a method of organization that kind of disguised itself as a band. We're talking about William James Count Basie.
Oh, Count.
And I want to set the stage here immediately. We aren't just doing a biography of a guy who played the piano.
I mean, probably 90% of the picture. He wasn't the most technical player of his generation.
No.
That was probably someone like Art Tatum. And he wasn't the most prolific composer. That was Duke Ellington, hands down.
Sure.
But Basie was the architect of something arguably more physical. He built the engine of swing.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's the angle I really want to unpack. I was looking at the timeline while prepping for this, and the longevity is, frankly, it's wild.
Yeah.
He leads a band from 1935 until his death in 1984.
Almost 50 years. It's unheard of.
It's nearly half a century. I mean, he steered this massive ship through the vaudeville era, the Depression, the swing craze, the death of the big bands.
The rise of bebop.
The rise of bebop, rock and roll, and even into the synthesizer era of the 80s. And he didn't just survive all that.
No, he thrived. He remained the gold standard through all of it.
It's the ultimate case study in adaptability, isn't it?
It really is. You have to remember, the big band it's a dinosaur by 1950. Economically, it just shouldn't exist anymore.
Right.
Logistically, touring with 16 to 18 people is a complete nightmare. Yet Basie kept it viable. And he didn't just have one great band. He created two entirely distinct legendary bands.
The Old Testament, the New Testament band.
Exactly. The band of the 30s and then the reinvented one from the 50s onward.
And he did it all with a leadership style that I find so fascinating, counterintuitive. In a genre just filled with these massive egos, these loud personalities.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, think Betty Goodman or, God forbid, Buddy Rich.
Couples.
Basie was the quiet man. He led by listening. So our mission today is to figure out how a failed drummer from New Jersey became, American jazz royalty.
The Count.
The Count. And specifically, I want to drill down into the mechanics of that rhythm section, the physics of it.
In the all-American rhythm section. We are definitely going to spend some time there because that is where the DNA of modern music really shifts.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning, but I want to skip the standard. He was born, he went to school stuff. Let's talk about Red Bank, New Jersey, around, say, 1915, 1920.
Right.
We know his mother, Lillian, taught him his first piano notes. His father was a groundskeeper. It's a humble beginning. We know about the 25-cent lessons. But the pivotal moment for me, the thing that explains everything about his later style, is that he didn't want to be a pianist. He wanted to be a drummer.
He was obsessed with the drums. And I think if you really listen to Basie's mature piano style, those short percussive jabs he makes, the way he uses space, it's the playing of a frustrated drummer.
That's a great way to put it.
He isn't playing these long, flowing melody lines. He's playing rhythm on a melodic instrument.
But he got chased off the kit, so to speak. And not just by anyone.
No, not at all. By Sonny Greer, who was also a Red Bank local. And Greer was, he was a prodigy. He had the flash, the speed, the independence of limbs. He was the real deal.
And Basie just sees this.
Basie recounts hearing Greer play and basically having a crisis of confidence, a complete I can't do that moment. So at age 15, he just retreated to the piano.
It is one of the great what-ifs of jazz history, isn't it? If Sonny Greer is just 10% less talented,
right.
Basie stays on drums, maybe he becomes a solid local timekeeper, and we never get the Count Basie Orchestra.
And frankly, Duke Ellington loses his legendary drummer because Greer went on to be Duke's anchor for decades.
Wow.
It's a total sliding doors moment. But that retreat to the piano wasn't a retreat into virtuosity. That's the key. He didn't try to become Liszt or Art Tatum. He took that drummer's mindset, the idea that your job is to drive the band, not to drown it out, and he applied it directly to the 88 keys.
And he honed that mindset in a very specific, and I'd say grueling environment.
Oh, absolutely.
The vaudeville circuit, the TOBA circuit, the Theater Owners Booking Association.
The tough-on-black artists circuit, as it was known.
Exactly. I think people romanticize this era, but reading the accounts, this was a grind. But more importantly, it was a very specific type of musical training.
This is so crucial. He wasn't playing concertos.
No, he was accompanying silent movies and comedians.
I'll think about that for a second. When you are the pianist for a silent movie, you are reacting constantly. You are watching the screen, If a character slips on a banana peel, you hit a chord. You're training your eye-ear coordination second by second.
Musical punchline.
Exactly. But accompanying the vaudeville acts, the singers like Gonzelle White or the comedians, that is where he truly learned the art of the fill.
Right, because if you play over the punchline,
You get fired.
yeah.
Simple as that. If the comedian is setting up a joke, you have to be completely invisible. If the singer is taking a breath between phrases, that is your window. That's your 1 or 2 seconds to play a little run, a little flourish.
And if you play while they're singing,
You're stepping on the product. So for years, Basie's being trained to listen first, play second. He learned that silence is actually a powerful part of the arrangement.
which is the complete antithesis of the jazz soloist ego that develops later with bebop, right? Where the goal is to cram as many notes as physically possible into the bar.
Completely. Basie is coming from a service mindset. He's there to serve the act. He's a supporting character.
And that service mindset eventually lands him in the Midwest. He gets stranded in Kansas City on a tour that falls apart.
And this is where the chemistry set really starts to bubble.
Yes.
You have a guy trained in the Harlem stride tradition because he did spend time in New York learning from Fats Waller, learning that heavy left-hand organ technique.
Right, that oompa sound.
But now he's dropped into the middle of the Kansas City blues scene. It's a totally different flavor.
I want to focus on the Kansas City sound for a second because it really is distinct from what was happening in New York or New Orleans. It just feels, I don't know, looser.
It is significantly looser, and there's a reason for that. New York jazz in the late 20s and early 30s, think Fletcher Henderson's band, was becoming very arranged, very sophisticated. It was about reading music on a chart.
Polished.
Very polished. Kansas City, on the other hand, was a wide-open town. It was run by the Pendergast political machine, which meant prohibition didn't really exist there. The clubs were open 24 hours a day.
Wow.
So the musicians were playing these marathon 8-10-hour gigs. You physically cannot play complex written arrangements for 10 hours straight. You need something more sustainable.
This brings us to the head arrangement. I was reading about this process, and honestly, as a musician, it sounds terrifying.
It is.
You have a 10-piece, later a 16-piece band. There is no sheet music.
Yeah.
And they're just winging it. How does that not turn into a complete train wreck every night?
It works because of one simple, powerful concept: the riff.
Okay.
A riff is just a short, rhythmic, melodic phrase, maybe 2 bars long, super catchy. In a head arrangement, the saxophone section might start playing a riff they just made up.
On the spot.
Completely on the spot. The trumpets hear it, and they invent a counter riff, something that fits in the gaps of the saxophone line. Then the trombones come in and add a bottom layer, another riff. It's collective real-time composition.
So it's modular. It's like building with musical Legos.
It is entirely modular, and because they had to memorize it instantly, the music had to be simple. It had to be blues-based. It had to be catchy.
Right.
It relied on rhythm and repetition rather than, say, harmonic complexity. That's why the Kansas City sound makes you want to dance. It's hypnotic.
And the ultimate example of this whole process has to be 1 O'Clock Jump. The story of how that song was born is just incredible.
It's the perfect illustration. They were doing a late-night radio broadcast from the Reno Club in Kansas City. And this is also, by the way, where he gets the nickname Count.
Oh, right. The announcer.
The radio announcer wanted to give him some style to compete with Duke Ellington and Earl Fatha Hines. So on the air, he just dubs him Count Basie, and it's stuck.
So he's the new Count. They're live on the radio, and they're running out of material.
They're running out of time to fill. So Basie just turns to the band and says something like, "We're going to hit the rhythm, and then you guys come in." And he starts playing a simple blues pattern in the key of D-flat.
Okay, now D-flat is a great key for a pianist. It fits under the fingers nicely.
Okay.
But for horn players.
It's a miserable key for horn players. It's a nightmare. Lots of flats to navigate mentally, especially when you're improvising.
But they do it.
They do it. They lock in instantly. But then the real magic happens. Midway through the song, Basie modulates. He just changes the key up to F.
Live on the radio.
Live on the radio. Now think about the panic that should induce. You have 12 guys making up riffs, and suddenly the entire harmonic floor shifts underneath them. They have to transpose everything they were doing up a fourth instantly.
And they nailed it.
They didn't just nail it. That key change became the signature hook of the song. It's proof that these guys weren't just jamming randomly. They had ears like radar.
They were listening.
They were listening to Basie so intently that wherever he went, they followed immediately. That is that leadership through listening we talked about earlier.
Okay, so we have the riffs. We have the on-the-fly improvisation. But a riff is just a melody, unless it has a powerful engine behind it. And this is where we really need to get technical.
Yes.
The All-American Rhythm section. Basie on piano, Walter Page on bass, Joe Jones on drums, and Freddie Green on guitar.
The holy quartet of swing. You cannot overstate their importance.
I want to talk about Freddie Green first.
Yeah.
Because to a modern listener, or maybe a rock fan, Freddie Green makes absolutely no sense.
He's an enigma.
He played an unamplified acoustic guitar in a band with 13 blasting horns. He almost never took a solo in a 50-year career. Why on earth is he considered a legend?
Because of the physics of the chug. That's the only way I can describe it. You have to understand the acoustic environment in the 1930s. There are no monitors. The microphones are terrible. The band needs a pulse. It can feel in its bones.
Right.
So you have Walter Page on the bass playing the big foundational low notes on beats 1 and 3. You have Joe Jones on the hi-hats, giving you that high-frequency sizzle. Freddie Green occupied the mid-range.
Acoustic notch in the sound.
Exactly that. He played these big, high-action arch-top guitars, and he struck the strings with incredible force. But, and this is the secret, he damped them almost instantly with his left hand. So instead of a ringing krang chord that would just muddy everything up, you got a short, sharp, percussive chunk. 4 chunks to a bar, chunk, 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 chunk. It was a drum that just happened to play pitch.
And he was religious about not soloing. There are stories that if he ever played a single note line, Basie would just stop the band and glare at him.
Or he'd just stop playing himself. He'd lift his hands off the keys and just wait. The message was crystal clear. If you stop the heartbeat to show off, the patient dies. Freddie Green's discipline creates that relentless forward momentum. That's what musicians mean when they say a band is truly swinging. It's that unbreakable quarter note pulse.
It's like the drive shaft of the car.
Perfect analogy.
And then you have Joe Jones on drums, who completely changes the game. He stops pounding the bass drum on every single beat.
This was the revolution. Before Joe Jones, drummers played like marching bands. It was boom, 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 boom on the bass drum. It was heavy. It was plodding.
Sure.
Joe Jones moves the primary timekeeping function from the bass drum up to the hi-hat cymbals, that shimmering sound that we now take for granted. That was him.
And what did that do for the sound?
It did 2 things. First, it opened up the entire bottom end of the audio spectrum so you could actually hear the bass player, Walter Page, walking his bass lines. And second, it made the rhythm feel like it was floating. It became aerodynamic. It allowed the band to jump, not just stomp.
And Basie is sitting on top of all of this. He isn't playing that heavy Harlem stride anymore. He's not playing constant rhythm.
He doesn't need to. Freddie Green and Walter Page have the rhythm completely covered. Basie is now free to do something totally new for a pianist. Comping.
Just playing chords.
Not even full chords sometimes. He plays accents, he plays conversation, he'll poke a soloist with a little phrase, he'll drop in a dissonant chord just to wake everyone up. He became the conductor from the keyboard.
So you have this absolutely airtight rhythm section, and then you have the horns. And Basie, being the brilliant manager that he was, decides to manufacture some drama up front.
Oh, yeah.
The duel of the tenors.
Yeah.
Lester Young versus Herschel Evans.
This wasn't just a musical difference. This was a fundamental personality clash that Basie exploited for maximum theatrical effect. Herschel Evans was the hawk. He was from the Coleman Hawkins school of tenor sax. Meaning a huge, muscular, heavy tone with a wide, aggressive vibrato. It was a masculine, emotional Texas sound. He would growl through the horn.
And Lester Young.
Lester Young was from another planet entirely. They called him Prez, as in the president. He held the saxophone at a weird sideways angle, almost like a flute. His tone was light, airy, with almost zero vibrato. It was cerebral, it was cool.
And they did not get along.
Evans hated Young's playing. He thought it was weak and effeminate. Young thought Evans' style was corny and old-fashioned.
And Basie, instead of trying to make peace, puts them on opposite sides of the stage.
It was brilliant theater. He would point to Evans, who would play a blistering, passionate chorus and whip the crowd into a frenzy with that raw power. Then everything would calm down, and he'd nod to Lester Young, who would just float in with this cool, detached, elegant melody. It taught the audience that jazz could be 2 things at once. It could be hot and it could be cool. It could be physical and it could be intellectual. And it forced the band to be able to pivot instantly between those 2 completely different energies.
So this lineup, the Old Testament band, eventually gets discovered by the famous producer John Hammond.
Right. He hears them on a shortwave radio broadcast in his car in Chicago, and he literally drives to Kansas City to find them.
He finds them. They record the famous Jones Smith Incorporated sessions. Because Basie was under contract to someone else?
A session that Hammond later called the only completely perfect recording session I've ever had anything to do with. You get tracks like Shoeshine Boy and Lady Be Good from that. Pure lightning in a bottle.
So they have the record, they have the hype, and they head to New York City. But this is where the story hits a pretty big snag. They arrive at the Roseland Ballroom in 1937, and they essentially flop.
They flopped because of context. The New York audience at a place like the Roseland was used to the polish of Fletcher Henderson or Duke Ellington. They were used to sophisticated arrangements, smooth transitions, written charts.
And Basie's band comes in.
And they're playing these raw, riff-based head arrangements. They are relying on pure energy and bluesy improvisation. And to the sophisticated New York ear, it sounded like noise. It sounded like a backwoods band.
There's that one review that said the band was supposed to set the place on fire, but the Roseland is still standing.
Ouch. Yeah. It was a brutal wake-up call. It was the moment they realized that pure Kansas City energy wasn't enough to conquer the East Coast. They had to refine the presentation.
So they had to learn to read music better, clean up the intros and the outros.
Exactly. They had to professionalize the raw energy without killing it.
But they clearly didn't lose the fire. Because a year later, 1938, they walk into the Savoy Ballroom in Harlem to face off against Chick Webb's band. And for our listeners, the Battle of the Bands at the Savoy wasn't just a figure of speech. This was a gladiator match.
It was absolutely a combat sport. The audience, which could be thousands of the best dancers in the world, literally voted with their feet. If they danced to your band, you won. If they sat down, you lost.
And Chick Webb was the undisputed king of the Savoy.
He was a small man, a hunchback due to spinal tuberculosis, but he was a drummer of terrifying power and aggression. He was famous for literally physically exhausting other bands. He would just play faster and louder until the other guys couldn't keep up and just packed it in.
So Chick Webb comes out swinging. He's sweating. He's beating the drums furiously. He's driving his band like a madman. How does Basie respond to that?
And this is the absolute genius of Basie's temperament. He didn't try to outmuscle Chick Webb. You can't outmuscle Chick Webb at the Savoy. It's a fool's errand.
So what did he do?
He played the rope-a-dope. He kept the tempos medium, even a little relaxed. He let that all-American rhythm section lock into that deep, cutting butter groove we talked about. He smiled. He just sat there poised and played those little splank chords.
He contrasted Webb's raw aggression with absolute unshakable cool.
And it worked. The dancers realized that while Chick Webb was incredibly impressive to watch, the Basie band was just better to dance to. The swing was deeper, more hypnotic.
So who won?
While Webb was the aggressor, the press, specifically Metronome magazine, declared Basie's band the conqueror. They praised the musical science behind their swing.
That moment solidified his status, didn't it?
That was the moment he went from being a regional Kansas City hero to a national superstar. That victory at the Savoy proved that you didn't need to be the loudest or the fastest to be the best. You just had to swing the hardest.
So Basie wins the battle. He becomes a huge star through the late 30s and early 40s. But then the world changes. The war, the musicians' union strike, changing tastes.
And eventually, the economics of the big band just completely collapse. You can't afford to put 18 guys on a bus anymore.
Basie actually has to disband the orchestra in 1950. That must have felt like the end of an era.
It was a very dark time for him and many others. The swing era was definitively over. Bebop was the new cool thing. And it was music for listening, for chin-stroking, not for dancing. Small combos were cheaper. Basie found himself touring with a sextet, an octet, playing small clubs. For a lot of band leaders, this was the retirement phase.
But Basie decides to double down. In 1952, he reforms the full 16-piece orchestra. This is the beginning of the New Testament band. And I want to argue that this is actually the more impressive musical achievement.
I agree with you completely.
The Old Testament band was about lightning in a bottle. It was a collection of brilliant, one-of-a-kind soloists like Lester Young. The New Testament band was about the ensemble.
That's it, exactly. The New Testament band was a composer's band. He couldn't afford to have a band full of superstar soloists anymore, so he made the band itself the superstar. He hired brilliant young arrangers like Neil Hefti and later Quincy Jones.
And the precision of this new group was terrifying.
This is the Atomic Basie era, and the title of that album, The Atomic Mr. Basie, is perfect. The key to their sound was dynamic range.
Explain that.
They perfected what became known as the Basie crescendo. They would start a phrase at a whisper, I mean, so quiet you could literally hear the saxophone player's keys clicking.
Wow.
And then, in the space of a single beat, they would explode into a triple four-pay wall of sound that would knock you out of your seat. And just as quickly, they would drop back down to a whisper.
It's the musical equivalent of a jump scare, but groovy.
It is shock and awe. It's all about control. And the absolute masterpiece of this era, the ultimate test of that control, is their recording of Neil Hefti's Lil Darlin'.
I was listening to Lil Darlin' this morning in preparation. It is painfully slow.
It is tantalizingly slow. And from a musician's perspective, playing fast is easy. Playing that slow and keeping it perfectly together with 16 other people, that is the hardest thing you can possibly do.
Why?
Because there's nowhere to hide. The horn players have to control their breath so there's not the slightest waver in the note. The drummer has to wait until the absolute last possible millisecond to hit the beat, creating this incredible tension. The whole thing could fall apart at any second.
And Basie introduces it on the piano with that famous halting, sparse intro.
That intro sets the rules for the whole performance. He is telling the audience, we are in no rush. You're on our time now. It's the ultimate power move. In an era where rock and roll is starting to speed everything up, Basie slows everything way down.
You mentioned rock and roll. The 1950s is when Sinatra, Elvis, Chuck Berry, they're taking over the culture. Basie survives by pivoting his business model again.
He becomes the premier backing band for the great vocalists.
He hitched his star to the singers.
He realized that if he couldn't be the pop star on the jukebox, he would back the pop stars. The collaboration with Frank Sinatra, specifically the 1966 album Sinatra at the Sands, is probably the definitive live album of that century.
I love that album.
Sinatra needed Basie. Sinatra had all the swagger in the world, but Basie provided the raw power, the engine. You can just hear Sinatra feeding off the energy of that rhythm section.
And he brought in the singer Joe Williams, which was a huge move.
Joe Williams was absolutely critical. He was a classic blues shouter, but with this smooth, velvety voice. So you have hits like "Every Day I Have the Blues." That allowed Basie to reconnect with his core black audience who loved the blues.
Right.
While the polished, sophisticated arrangements kept the white collegiate audience happy, it was a perfect crossover strategy that kept the band working and relevant.
I want to weave in a little of his personal life here, because I think it speaks to the stability he found in the 50s and 60s. He was making real money again. He moved his family out to Queens.
To Adderley Park in St. Albans, yes. And this is a really significant part of Black American history. In 1946, Basie and his wife, Catherine, moved into this neighborhood, which had been a restricted whites-only development.
Wow.
But Basie, along with folks like Fats Waller and later Jackie Robinson and James Brown, they integrated it. It became this incredible, beautiful enclave of Black excellence and success.
It grounds him, doesn't it? The image we have of the wild partying jazz musician just doesn't fit him.
No. He was a husband. He was a father to his daughter Diane, who had cerebral palsy, and he was devoted to her. He would come home from these world tours, go to his house in Queens, put on his slippers, and just watch TV.
He called himself a non-playing pianist when he was at home.
Right. He loved westerns. He loved comic books. And then in the 60s, he adopted that trademark yachting cap.
The yachting cap. It became his crown, didn't it?
It absolutely did. As he aged, he took on this elder statesman persona, the cap, maybe a cigar, the slow, deliberate walk to the piano. He became a living symbol of jazz survival.
Which is probably why he has that amazing cameo in the movie Blazing Saddles.
Playing April in Paris, in the middle of the desert while the posse rides by. It's legendary.
It showed he was in on the joke, you know? He knew he'd become this living monument.
He had a great sense of humor.
But let's circle back to the music one last time. We talked about the precision of the New Testament band. But Basie's own playing changed, too. It got even more minimal.
He stripped it down even further. We need to talk about the splank.
The splank.
The splank. It's an onomatopoeia for his signature piano voicing. It's usually a high, dissonant 3- or 4-note chord played with a very sharp attack. Splank.
And he would use it so staringly.
In the 50s and 60s, Basie would sometimes go 32 bars without playing a single note. He would just sit there, smiling, letting the bass and drums and Freddie Green run the show.
Then, at the most pivotal moment of a soloist's phrase, he would just drop one splank. But isn't that... Well, let me play devil's advocate here for a second. Is that genius, or is that just being lazy? Or maybe just old?
It is the absolute opposite of lazy. It requires immense mental discipline and focus. A lazy player noodles. A lazy player fills every empty space because they're insecure. Silence makes them nervous.
Okay.
Basie was editing in real time. He was listening to the chaotic conversation of 16 instruments and saying, I will only speak when my comment clarifies the entire sentence. That one chord would reset the band, it would outline the harmony for the soloist, and it would kick the rhythm section in the pants all at the same time.
It's the editor-in-chief approach to piano playing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He wasn't the writer anymore, he was the editor. And in a world of increasing noise, the editor is often the most important person in the room.
You know, that brings us right back to the core insight of this whole deep dive. We called it leadership through listening. When I look at Basie's career, 50 years of managing difficult personalities, changing musical trends, financial pressures, he never seemed to panic. He never screamed at anyone.
There's a famous story that if a musician in the band was playing badly or stepping out of line, Basie wouldn't fire them. He wouldn't yell at them after the show.
What would he do?
He would just play a little repetitive, annoying musical figure on the piano during their solo that mimicked their mistake. He would gently mock them musically in front of everyone. The musician would get the message immediately.
That is quietly devastating.
It is. But it was effective, and it kept the vibe loose. He treated his musicians like adults. He gave them space. Look at how he treated Freddie Green. He let Freddie Green be the boss of the rhythm. He let the arrangers be the boss of the notes. Basie was simply the boss of the vibe.
He managed the culture of the band.
That's it. And that culture outlived him. Basie died in 1984, but the Count Basie Orchestra is still touring the world today. They're essentially a classical institution now, like the New York Philharmonic.
And they still value that sound.
And they still play the splank. They still play 1 o'clock jump. Because Basie created a system, a philosophy, that was bigger than himself. He built a machine that runs on swing, and as long as you have a drummer who can work a hi-hat and guitarist who can play 4 steady quarter notes, that machine will run forever.
So for the listener who maybe only knows Basie from the Sinatra records or maybe Fly Me to the Moon, where should they start if they want to really hear what we've been talking about today?
I would say listen to 2 tracks back to back. First, listen to Lester Leaps In from the Old Testament era, 1939. Hear that raw Kansas City small group energy. Hear the duel between Lester Young and Basie.
Right.
Then, immediately after, listen to Little Darlin' from the Atomic Mr. Basie album from 1957. Listen for the dynamic control. Listen to how impossibly quiet they get. If you can really hear and appreciate the difference between those 2 incredible tracks, you understand the genius and the evolution of Count Basie.
And listen to the guitar. Make it a project. Try to pick out Freddie Green's chunk in the background.
Yes. Once you hear it, you can never unhear it in any song.
It's the heartbeat of the last century of popular music.
It really is.
So to wrap this up, I think our final thought has to be about this idea of leadership through listening. Basie was almost never the loudest player in his own band. He let the saxophones duel, he let the drummer drive, he let the trumpet scream. He just intervened with a single note or a single chord to steer the ship. In a world of loud egos, both then and now, Basie proved that the person doing the least amount of talking is often the one who is in total control.
Power and subtlety. A great lesson.
Thanks for diving in with us on this one. Keep listening, keep swinging, and we'll see you on the next one.